Just as negotiations with the United States were easing the tension, they suddenly launched a late-night saturation missile attack. What's going on here? Isn't Iran afraid of a United States counterattack? What's their game plan? Also, Saudi Arabia has joined the fray for the first time, teaming up with the United States to strike an Iranian-backed group. What group is it? Why did Saudi Arabia make such an exception? And then there's Dr. Fauci, the chief doctor during the COVID pandemic, testifying before the Senate today. His hours of testimony left the whole country stunned. What happened there? Also, Russia has issued a global warrant for the founder of Telegram. Why? It's linked to a major reversal in the Russia-Ukraine war. All right, what's the full story? Welcome to Good Morning America, hosted by Fang Wei. Hello to our YouTube viewers and our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Okay, let's talk about this. The United States and Iran have been trading attacks for about 13 days. On July 24th, President Trump halted a planned 2-week bombing campaign against Iran to start negotiations. President Trump recently said that the negotiations are progressing well. Iran also announced that since you're not attacking me, I won't attack you, and stopped its strikes on United States forces. This led to the first few nights of relative calm since last Friday. But then, right in the middle of talks, at 1:15 a.m. on July 28th, that's Iran time, Iran suddenly launched a sneak attack on a United States base in Jordan. 5 ballistic missiles targeted a United States air base and a central command center in Jordan. It was a volley, meaning all 5 missiles were fired at once in a saturation attack, hoping to penetrate the United States air defense network. The United States military didn't realize it until the missiles were almost there, with only minutes to spare. They responded immediately, and the interceptor units were scrambling in a total frenzy. Within 2 minutes, they locked onto the coordinates of each missile and launched interceptors, successfully taking down all of Iran's missiles at the very last second. When President Trump heard about this, he was furious. He said Iran dared to launch a sneak attack, and then he'd give them a real beating, beat the hell out of them. Basically, Trump was using some choice words. He was absolutely livid. So why did this happen? The direct reason, in my view, is what happened 10 days ago. Iran also launched a sneak attack on a United States base in Jordan, the same one, Muwafaq Salti. It might have been in the early morning, too, but the United States military hasn't released the exact time of that attack. Regardless, the July 18th attack was successful. It broke through the air defenses and hit a temporary housing area at the base, killing 3 United States service members and wounding 4 others. The whole country was in mourning. President Trump personally went to receive the caskets and attended the funeral. Seeing this, Iran made its own calculation. If they kill a few more United States troops, the United States might back down because Americans can't stomach casualties. So Iran's strategy is to play a game of costs, or rather a game of human lives. I'll trade 10 of my lives for 1 of yours. In the end, you won't be able to hold out either. So the commander of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Cooper, warned U.S. soldiers that the cell phone videos and social media posts you're using are providing Iran with real-time battle damage assessments. At the same time, this could help Iran plan subsequent strikes against the U.S. military. So now it's very likely, that U.S. troops in Jordan will have to hand over their cell phones and won't be able to use them anymore. We all know that Jordan is actually separated from Iran by the entirety of Iraq, It's actually the U.S. military's rear. Then this U.S. rear was raided by Iran on July 18th. It really hit home all at once, actually hitting 7 U.S. soldiers, So they've clearly gotten a taste for it, using negotiations to lull President Trump into a false sense of security while launching a surprise attack. Then the United States followed up by launching another strike against Iraq. Iran attacks Jordan. Why would the U.S. military attack Iraq? Why's that? Okay, well, I'll tell you in a bit, but first let me give you the background on this. What's the situation with the U.S. attack in Iraq? Attacking Iraq means attacking an Iraqi militia, and this militia is backed by Iranian money. It's a militia raised by Iran. So you think it's very strange, an Iraqi militia raised by Iran? What's going on there? Let's go back 12 years to 2014, when ISIS rose in Iraq, capturing cities and territory, establishing the Islamic State, and their forces were even closing in on Baghdad. At that time, the Iraqi government called upon brave warriors from all over, to take up arms and save the state, using terms from our Chinese episodic novels. Hey, Iraq doesn't have a king. It was just taking up arms to help the government. As a result, this Shiite militia force emerged from eastern Iraq. Hey, they call themselves the People's Mobilization Forces, huh? Popular Mobilization Forces, PMF. Behind them is the financial support of Iran. Then, under the command of U.S. General Kurilla, Kurilla was the deputy commander of special forces then, and now he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? So under General Kurilla's command, these local Iraqi forces, in coordination with the U.S. military and the Iraqi government forces, completely defeated the Islamic State. So what happened after the fight was over? What about this force? They were integrated into Iraq's national armed forces, but they remained an independent unit, appointing their own officers and maintaining a high degree of autonomy. It's a bit like the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army, Integrated into the Nationalist Army, but still acting on their own, Often ignoring orders. Even though they're part of the Iraqi government forces, they've taken the initiative. They dare to attack U.S. troops in Iraq, so they've never been obedient, and the Iraqi government can't do anything about them. And recently, they've launched drones attacking Saudi oil facilities, A U.S. military spokesperson said that in the past 72 hours, there have been over 30 drone attacks by this militia group, the PMF, on energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia's eastern province. So as a result, Saudi Arabia couldn't take it anymore. You're simply asking for trouble by provoking someone way out of your league, Iran is too big. I don't dare attack it. But do I not even dare to attack the dogs that Iran keeps? But Saudi Arabia doesn't dare to act rashly, nor does it dare to underestimate the enemy. So this time, they asked the U.S. military to join forces with them to launch an airstrike on the headquarters of the Popular Mobilization Forces, the PMF headquarters, in the southern Iraqi city of Basra. The PMF said that over 20 people were killed and over 30 were injured. So this is also the first time Saudi Arabia has truly jumped into the fray in this round of the Gulf War, which is very symbolic. So it's worth watching what happens next. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia's role. Saudi Arabia is actually the largest and strongest of the 6 Gulf countries in the Middle East, and it considers itself the leader of the Gulf states, the leader of the GCC. But it's always been afraid to fight Iran. When attacked by Iran, it only issues condemnations and never dares to fight back. It won't sign the Abraham Accords either, and it won't easily give up Palestinian rights. Meaning, I'm still the big brother after all. So it maintains this kind of posture. At the same time, it has a very good relationship with the United States. The Saudi crown prince, basically the prince, since the old king is very old now and doesn't really manage things anymore. So this crown prince, Salman, has a very good relationship with Trump. In short, they try to make peace with everyone and offend no one. That's the situation. But this time, being hit right on the head by a militia, they couldn't take it. So we see this rare occurrence of them jumping into the fray for the first time to strike back. On another front, the Houthis in the northwest corner of Yemen, who are basically warlords, have started blockading the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and attacking ships in the Red Sea. Just yesterday, a ballistic missile hit a Saudi ship, but it didn't stop it. An explosion was heard, but the ship wasn't stopped, so it continued on its way. Regardless, the attacks in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and on Red Sea vessels hit Saudi Arabia's core interests, because the Red Sea is basically where Saudi Arabia loads and transports oil. So Saudi Arabia is not only striking back, but might also send troops. They are already commanding the Yemeni government forces, one of their allies, to attack the Houthis. Okay, so that's basically the situation. And what was Iraq's reaction? It's also very interesting. The Iraqi prime minister said, "You violated our sovereignty. No, you can't do that. I was supposed to meet with you, the Saudi crown prince, but now I won't." Saudi Arabia said this isn't an escalation of war, but a response to aggression. The militia attacked them, so they hit back. So Iraq is also interesting. The prime minister just came to the U.S. to talk cooperation and wants to play mediator between the U.S. and Iran. So you see, it's not just Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia doesn't dare provoke Iran or the U.S., and Iraq also doesn't dare provoke Iran or the U.S. This is the general state of Middle Eastern countries. hesitant and afraid to truly take a side. That's the situation. The latest news is that Iran, according to media reports, CNN reports, has signed a contract to purchase portable air defense missiles manufactured by the CCP. It's expected that within just a few weeks, they'll receive the first batch of 4 million units. This deal, valued at $60 to $70 million, is seen as the largest short-range air defense procurement Iran has received since the Middle East conflict began. Reuters, citing 3 sources familiar with the matter, said the contract includes 300 to 400 man-portable air defense missiles covering 2 models of shoulder-fired missiles, the Chinese QW-12 and the fluorine mononitride 16. We all remember back then that F-15A, the plane flown by that U.S. Air Force colonel that was shot down, that was done using a shoulder-fired air defense missile manufactured by the CCP. So now it's like giving them another 300 to 400 units. And this time it's like poking the bear again, because Trump warned at the time that if the U.S. confirms the CCP is shipping weapons to Iran, he would impose a 50% tariff on Chinese goods exported to the U.S. As of now, the White House has not yet responded to this news. Anyway, in fact, the U.S. and Saudi strikes in southern Iraq were not in response to Iran's attack on the U.S. base in Jordan. So that retaliation hasn't happened yet, which is why Trump has already been using profanity, saying we should beat the crap out of him. So when Secretary of Defense Hegseth walked out of Central Command Headquarters, which is in Florida, by the way, not in the Middle East, he made a serious statement saying that Central Command is going to be very busy tonight, so everyone is waiting to see. At the same time, international crude oil prices started to jump, rising by over 3%. Brent crude rose to $83, and West Texas Intermediate is also nearly $80. Because it had dropped a few days ago and both sides started talking about peace, but now with the fighting, it's back up. That's the situation. All in all, it's back and forth. Okay, next let's look at a Senate hearing that the whole country is watching right now. The hearing is basically Dr. Fauci standing trial on the Senate. What does that mean? The former director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the chief presidential advisor during the COVID pandemic, I'm talking about under both President Trump and President Biden, is now in deep trouble. Today, he was forced to testify before the Senate. The whole country is watching, wanted him to clarify the truth about the COVID pandemic. What is this controversy about? Let me start with I'll start with the big controversy, the big picture. There are 3 major controversies surrounding Fauci. First is where exactly the source of COVID came from. Now, regarding the source of the COVID-19 virus at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a lot of evidence now suggests it came from funding provided by the Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which Fauci led. In other words, Fauci's institute funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology to develop the COVID-19 virus. Of course, it wasn't intentional. He was developing what's called gain of function for a bad virus. As it turned out, the resulting infectivity and lethality were terrifying, which is what triggered the COVID pandemic. But Dr. Fauci has always maintained it was from, that Hunan seafood market in Wuhan. So that's the first major controversy. Second, this controversy revolves around Fauci's concealment. Basically, a lot of evidence now points to this, that the money came from his institute, but Fauci has been hiding it, saying, no, I didn't do this. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is the pandemic lockdowns, which everyone remembers, right? Whether it was city, state, or national lockdowns, though the country didn't lock down in the end, many cities were locked down, closed off, causing huge economic losses. And this lockdown economic shutdown, including back then, as you remember, the 6-foot distance, everyone had to stay 6 feet apart, and then wearing masks and so on. It turns out afterwards that there was no scientific basis for any of it. It was all just stuff Fauci made up on the spot. That's what they say anyway. The third controversy is that he repeatedly lied to the Senate, repeatedly lied to Congress. And of course, he testified before the House, so lying to Congress is a felony. So the one who's been holding Dr. Fauci accountable for years is federal Senator Rand Paul. Rand Paul is the only senator in the Senate with a medical background. Okay, he's always been skeptical of the policies Fauci recommended and the explanations he gave. The two of them, over the pandemic response and the funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, have been in this battle, an air battle. You could call it a war of words or a PR war for several years now. And now Paul is serving as the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee chairman, wielding great power. He now holds subpoena power. What is subpoena power? It means the Senate issues a subpoena, and whoever gets it has to show up. Now, even though Dr. Fauci was pardoned by Biden on Biden's last day in office, Paul is still the chairman of an important Senate committee. So Paul issuing this Senate subpoena can compel Dr. Fauci to testify in person on the issue of COVID origins. The focus is what I just mentioned, the lab leak theory versus the seafood market theory, so whether the virus really originated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Well, as it turns out, a few days before the hearing, Paul dropped a bombshell, which is to say, he said the Senate, in its investigation of Dr. Fauci, found Fauci's diaries from the pandemic period, his personal diaries. He ended up making a significant portion of these diaries public, over 1,000 pages. The time span is from December of 2019. As you know, the virus, the COVID pandemic, started in December. From December to 2 years later, December 2022, covering Fauci's final years as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. So these diaries, which he wrote for himself, were later taken and are now being made public. So in these diaries, it's written that Fauci would say one thing publicly, but write something else entirely in his diary. For example, lying, Fauci said, "I didn't shut down the economy." He repeatedly said in public, "I didn't advise the government to shut down the economy." But the diary records how he went to persuade the governor of New York to shut down the economy, how he persuaded the mayor of New York to shut down the economy, going to governor after governor, telling them, "You need to shut down the economy." But on the surface, he says he didn't. After the fact, that's what he said. And then the key point is, why did your money go to China? What were you doing there? It's not just him. It's not just Fauci's institute going to China for dangerous biological experiments. Many U.S. medical institutions went to China for dangerous experiments, you know? So in a sense, China is a testing ground for the United States. But why is that, do you know? So Heng He and I recorded a show yesterday called Where's the Road? I'll play it for you this afternoon. You know, Mr. Heng He, although he's a commentator, his original profession is he's a biological scientist. A biological scientist. He graduated from Jiangxi Medical College and has worked in biotechnology in the U.S. for many years. As for me, Feng Wei, I was in computer science. I'm a computer guy, so our backgrounds as commentators or influencers are different from what we do now. Anyway, that show is worth watching. You'll see why so many U.S. medical institutions went to China for these dangerous experiments. All right, so please subscribe. Remember to subscribe to Feng Wei's channel so you don't miss it. That way you'll get notified to watch the show. After subscribing, turn on the notification bell. Also, Senator Paul, the chairman, released 465 pages of documents from 2001 to 2015. Senator Paul said these private writings, like diaries, show a gap between Fauci's private thoughts and public statements, suggesting he was dishonest about the virus's origin and lied to the Senate and the American people. So what about Fauci? For Fauci, he has indeed received what's called a preemptive pardon from President Biden, a preemptive amnesty, a pardon. But this pardon only covers his past actions. It doesn't protect his future conduct. If he lies again during this Senate hearing, it could constitute a new count of perjury. There would be no pardon for that, right? Because Trump certainly wouldn't pardon him. As a result, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said on Fox News that Fauci might be committing perjury at the Senate. If he lies again, he could be prosecuted for perjury. Fauci's legal team warned that this hearing was designed specifically to create an opportunity for criminal charges. So what happens now? What do you think? He can't refuse to come to the Senate, but if he does, will he tell the truth? Well, over the past few hours, Fauci just kept repeating one single sentence. Can you believe it? One sentence for hours. He said, I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights and refuse to answer. What is the Fifth Amendment? It means a person, a defendant, cannot be forced to incriminate themselves. If their words could lead to a conviction, they have the right to remain silent. It basically says, if you want to prove I'm guilty, find a way yourself. Don't make me prove it. I can refuse to answer. This is the Fifth Amendment. It's really an amendment that protects the defendant. He just refused to answer. Sure, you can refuse to answer, but for hours, question after question about the virus origin, the lab funding, all the follow-ups on the diary contents, he just kept saying, I refuse to answer, I refuse to answer, I refuse to answer. So it was just like a total farce, you know? To put it in more formal terms, the scene was highly dramatic. Fauci's lawyer kept whispering advice on how to handle it, but Senator Paul kicked him out right then and there. As the chairman, he called the Senate police to escort him out. So the whole country saw what happened. For hours, Fauci just kept saying, I won't answer, I won't answer, I won't answer. Of course, is there a price for not answering? Of course there is, right? If you're so confident, why not answer? Since you won't answer, it clearly makes you look guilty, doesn't it? So I don't know if you watched it, but what do you think about Fauci's testimony in the Senate? Because this isn't just about Fauci or even just about America. It's about the root source of the COVID pandemic that claimed millions of lives globally. Okay, and President Trump posted a tweet this morning. Let me read a bit of the latter half for you. President Trump said Fauci's ideas are too crazy. He said, I said from the start the virus came from the Wuhan lab in China, but Fauci strongly disagreed, always trying to protect communist China. He said China, but I'm calling it communist China. He said Fauci has been in that position since the 1980s, and I inherited him. When I was president, he was my chief advisor. I inherited him. But as the days went by, I trusted him less and less. He said he made too many wrong judgments, like on the mask issue. Remember, he was anti-mask at first, then he became a super masker. But regardless, even though he wanted to shut down the whole country, I didn't let him do that. He said, I eventually took the federalist route, letting the governors decide for themselves. And as it turned out, Republican governors did much better than the Democratic ones. Fauci was basically sidelined by me later on. Then Joe Biden came along and treated Fauci like a king. I called Biden back then and told him Fauci was no good, either clueless or dishonest. That call was well received. Biden spoke with him, but unfortunately, no action was taken. Biden continued to give Fauci massive, destructive power, and the rest is history. Wow, I don't know what you think. What's your take on Fauci? Today, he just said with every sentence, I can't incriminate myself, I have no answer, I won't answer, I won't answer. What do you think? Do you think Fauci has issues? Please leave a comment. Let's make a public judgment, okay? Let's see. Do you think Fauci has problems or not? What are your thoughts on this? All right, next, I'll tell you about Russia's global manhunt for the founder of Telegram. What was that for? What's the situation? Okay, let's first talk about what happened. So the latest news is that Russia has issued a global warrant for the arrest of Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram. They're accusing him of causing significant harm to Russia and are seeking a 15-year prison sentence. So what's this all about? Well, let's start with a brief history of Telegram's founder. You see this young man here? His name is Pavel Durov. He's quite a legendary figure. He went from being the founder of the Russian version of Facebook to living in exile and building the global encrypted messaging empire, Telegram. Then in 2024, he was arrested in France, and now he's wanted globally by Russia. So what's the story behind all this? I'll give you the full story, or rather a brief overview. Durov was born in 1984 in Leningrad, Soviet Union, which is now St. Petersburg. Some of you might have noticed that 1984 is also the year Mark Zuckerberg was born. Durov's father was a professor of linguistics, and when he was young, he worked in Turin, Italy. So Pavel spent some time there, exposed to a multilingual environment from a young age. His talent for programming showed up very early on. It wasn't just him. His brother was also very talented. His name is Nikolai Durov. In college, he studied in the Department of Philology at St. Petersburg State University. His brother was a mathematical genius and a programming expert who later became the technical core of Telegram and the chief designer of its encryption protocol. The two brothers were the golden duo for almost all their projects. His first venture was in 2006 when he founded a social media platform called VK. You know, in 2004, Zuckerberg just started Facebook in the US. By 2006, it was just getting popular. Way over in Russia, Durov saw how powerful Facebook was and decided to follow suit, creating VK as a Russian version of Facebook. So VK quickly became the largest social platform in Russia and the CIS region, with over 100 million users. In Russia, 100 million users means almost everyone, or at least the vast majority of people. As a result, Durov became famous at a young age and his net worth skyrocketed. Since he was born in the same year as Zuckerberg, he became known as the Russian Mark Zuckerberg. They're similar in age, both young and talented, great at programming, and well, the software they built was practically identical. Durov is known for being quite eccentric. He once opened a window in his St. Petersburg office and folded ruble notes into paper airplanes, throwing them out one by one. It was quite a showy move. Then, during the anti-government protests in Russia in 2011 and 2012, the authorities demanded that VK, the Russian Facebook, hand over the personal data of opposition figures and shut down related protest groups. Durov publicly refused, saying no. So he became a thorn in the side of the authorities. In 2014, during the Ukraine crisis, which was the Crimea incident, Russia sent paratroopers to drop into the capital of Crimea and took it over. The authorities then demanded that he hand over data on the pro-European protesters in Ukraine, and he refused again. He even publicly posted a photo of the refusal order online, basically saying, "I'm openly defying you and I won't listen." As a result, he faced immense pressure from the government. Later, the government bought off key investors in his company's investment group, gradually increasing their shares and eventually forcing him out. In 2014, he was removed from his position as CEO by the board of directors, completely losing control of Versus K. He then left Russia and traveled around several countries, living a borderless life in exile. Wherever he went, because he was wealthy and talented, everyone wanted him to stay. He got his citizenship in St. Kitts. I don't actually know where St. Kitts is, but he got it there. Then he went to Nevis and got citizenship there, then to the UAE and got citizenship, and also in France. So he has 4 citizenships. His long-term home, where he settled, is in Dubai. Then, in 2013, the two brothers founded the instant messaging app called Telegram in Dubai, UAE. The reason he created this software back then was because he had once been cornered at his doorstep by Russian special police. At that moment, he said he realized he didn't have a secure communication tool that could evade government surveillance and informants. So he finally decided he was going to build one. After he moved to the UAE, he started working on it there. What he built is what we know today as Telegram. During the Russia-Ukraine conflict, many governments, militaries, NGOs, and individuals on both sides have widely used Telegram to release news because everyone was already very familiar with it, right? With his product. And then his brother Nikolai was in charge of the technology while he handled the product and the funding. Telegram focuses on encryption, privacy, and anti-censorship. It doesn't rely on ads and doesn't sell user data. So Durov has long used his own money to subsidize operations. Since he got hundreds of millions of dollars from selling VK, he used that to cover the costs. So Telegram spread globally by focusing on privacy, large groups, channel broadcasts, and almost no content moderation, especially in politically unstable regions. Where exactly? It quickly became popular in the Middle East, Russian-speaking areas, Ukraine, and so on. The user base grew from tens of millions to nearly 1 billion people, making it one of the world's most important instant messaging and information platforms. Later, Russia put increasing pressure on Telegram. Regulators first throttled its speed or blocked its voice and video call features. Now, with nearly 90 million users in Russia, and remember, Russia's total population is only 150 million, those 90 million users often have to rely on a VPN to use it normally, as it's been banned in Russia. However, it's precisely this lack of censorship, and refusal to cooperate with law enforcement that set the stage for his later trouble in France. So on August 24th, 2024, he flew from Azerbaijan to an airport near Paris called Le Bourget Airport on a private jet and was arrested by French police as soon as he landed. So why was he arrested? The core allegation is that you've long neglected content moderation and refused to cooperate with official French judicial investigations and data requests. Everything sent to you went unanswered, and you claim to know nothing. This led to the Telegram platform becoming a breeding ground for various criminal activities. So things like spreading child pornography, drug trafficking, money laundering, organized fraud, and so on, as well as refusing to provide law enforcement with the technical assistance needed for legal interception, all became charges against him, and he was arrested. Of course, the legal logic in France is quite controversial, because they basically mean that the platform founder himself should be held criminally liable for the criminal acts of users on the platform. Do you think he should be held liable?